The air was heavy with the scent of charcoal and blooming hydrangeas when I pulled into the gravel driveway of the rented lodge, the place my family had chosen for this year's reunion. I'd booked it myself months ago, negotiated the group rate, paid the deposit, and even covered the remaining balance when no one else stepped up. The porch lights glowed warmly, and kids' laughter spilled from the backyard, where a slip and slide had been unrolled across the grass. I smiled, relieved that everything had come together so well, even if it had taken more from me than anyone knew. I was the one who had made the spreadsheet with meal planning and assigned dishes, though most had ignored it. I was the one who made sure Aunt Denise's dietary needs were accommodated, that Uncle Frank's back wouldn't be irritated by the guest room mattress, that the yard games were packed in the van with the coolers. I hadn't been asked to take on these responsibilities. I had volunteered, but not for attention. I did it because I loved my family, because I thought we were stronger than the cracks I had started to see over the years, as I stepped onto the porch with 2 arms full of groceries, mostly snacks, drinks, and a backup tray of deviled eggs because I knew someone would forget. I saw my cousin Melissa look at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Half a smile, maybe polite, but her eyes didn't reflect it. She didn't come to help carry the bags inside. She simply turned and went back into the house, calling over her shoulder that someone was here. Someone. I told myself I was being too sensitive. Inside, the lodge smelled like roasted garlic and fresh-baked rolls, and the kitchen buzzed with the low hum of conversation and clattering silverware. Plates were already being served, though we had agreed dinner wouldn't start until 7, and it was barely 6:20. I felt like I had walked into a story already in progress, one I hadn't been invited to contribute to. I placed the bags on the counter, pushing aside a half-empty bottle of rosé to make space. My cousin Jared, always the golden boy, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, you made it," as if I hadn't been the one who booked the lodge under my name, hadn't spent the past week emailing updates to everyone about directions and parking instructions. "Made it?" I replied, trying to keep my voice light, teasing, but the words tasted strange. Then came the moment I still don't quite understand. Aunt June, matriarch in her own mind, came up to me with a napkin in one hand and a wine glass in the other. "I'm glad you could stop by," she said in a voice one reserves for a guest, not a host. I blinked, confused, unsure if I'd misheard her. "Stop by?" I repeated. She smiled with practiced grace, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Well, we didn't know if you were going to come. Melissa said you hadn't really confirmed." Felt the blood leave my face. "Confirmed?" I asked. "I booked the lodge. I paid for the catering deposit. I sent you all the email with the RSVP links." Aunt June sipped from her glass, completely unbothered. "Yes, dear, and that was so helpful, but we weren't sure if you were actually planning to stay." I stood in the middle of the kitchen, invisible and exposed at the same time, while around me my family moved on without pause. My voice felt too loud when I asked, "Did you think I was just the event planner?" She laughed softly. "Oh, don't be dramatic. We just thought you were being generous. Like, helping out." In that moment, something cracked inside of me, quietly but decisively. I looked around the room, seeing my relatives through a sharper lens. My brother Thomas, who hadn't answered any of my texts about ride shares. My cousin Leah, who had asked me to Venmo her gas money even though I'd covered the cabin fee for her whole family. My own mother, standing in the corner, laughing at something someone said, not even acknowledging my arrival. The room felt colder than it had outside. I hadn't been invited, not truly. I had been useful, necessary, convenient, a logistical machine with a credit card and a willingness to be overlooked. I didn't even remember sitting down, but suddenly I was at the edge of the dining table, a paper plate in front of me, a dry slice of ham I hadn't served myself. No one spoke to me. They passed plates around me as if I weren't there. A deep ache swelled in my chest, not from anger, not yet, but from the raw realization that my place in the family wasn't what I thought it was. I wasn't the cousin who could make people laugh until they cried. I wasn't the adored baby of the family. I wasn't the glue that held things together. I was the glue gun someone borrowed when things got messy, then stuffed back in a drawer. And I had paid for everything. The slice of ham on my plate blurred as my eyes welled up. though I blinked the tears away before they could fall. I chewed without tasting, mechanically, as voices around me rose and fell in waves of conversation I wasn't included in. A laugh here, a toast there. Uncle Frank raising his glass for a weekend of family, fun, and memories, as if I hadn't bought the wine in his hand. The words washed over me like cold rain. I excused myself quietly, not that anyone noticed. I took my glass, empty, and slipped out onto the back deck where the lanterns glowed like distant stars. The air was warm, but my skin felt clammy. From where I stood, I could hear the kids still squealing on the slip and slide, their joy pure and untouched by the politics inside. I used to be one of those kids. Back when reunions meant tug-of-war contests and watermelon-eating races, not budgeting spreadsheets and subtle exclusions. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through the messages I had sent to the family group chat. Dozens of them, clarifying who was bringing what, asking about dietary restrictions, confirming arrival times. Every thread started with me. Every question was answered, eventually, but barely acknowledged. A few thumbs-up reactions, a couple of sounds good. Nothing that resembled gratitude. A memory from 2 weeks ago flashed in my mind. Me, sitting on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by receipts and checklists, talking on speakerphone with the lodge coordinator about grill rentals, while simultaneously texting Leah to make sure her son's allergy meds would be packed. I'd skipped dinner that night, stomach twisted with anxiety that I'd forget something. And yet, here I was now, treated like a guest at my own table. The screen dimmed in my hand, but I didn't put the phone away. I opened my banking app and scrolled through the charges. $1,425 for the lodge, $278 for groceries, $192 for the last-minute catered barbecue from that place Uncle Frank liked. Dozens of smaller expenses, ice bags, condiments, backup plates, even custom lanyards with everyone's name on them that no one had bothered to wear. The total stunned me. I had known it was a lot, but seeing it all together hit different. I'd spent nearly $2,000. $2,000 for a family that hadn't even really invited me. Hey. I turned, startled, and saw my sister Kayla standing in the doorway. She was barefoot, holding a glass of sangria, her eyes a little hazy. You okay? She asked. I almost laughed. Peachy, I said. She leaned on the railing beside me, sipping her drink in silence for a moment. You know, they don't mean to be shitty, she said finally, staring into the dark yard. I don't think they even think about it, I replied. That's the problem. Kayla nodded slowly. You always do everything. Maybe they just assume you like it. Would you like to be forgotten the second your usefulness is over? I asked. She didn't answer. I didn't expect her to. We stood there in silence for another long stretch until she finally muttered, They should have done better. I should have done better. That part caught me. I turned to look at her, surprised. Her expression was apologetic but distant, like she couldn't figure out how to fix something she hadn't realized was broken until too late. You know, I said slowly, I used to look forward to these weekends. Me too, she whispered. I left her on the deck and went upstairs to the guest room I had reserved for myself. An afterthought, squeezed in last minute when all the other rooms had been claimed in the group chat before I even had a chance to pick. It was the smallest one, next to the laundry room. The window didn't open all the way, and the bed creaked every time I shifted. I sat on the edge, staring at my suitcase in the corner. Still zipped. I hadn't even unpacked. For a long time, I just sat there, letting the reality of it sink in. I thought of all the birthdays I'd remembered, the weddings I'd flown in for, the group gifts I'd organized and paid extra toward. I thought of the times I'd driven hours for someone's graduation or baby shower. And I thought of how no one, not one person, had said thank you tonight. Not for the booking, not for the food, not even for coming. The silence grew louder, pressing in from the thin walls around me. I felt smaller than I had in years. Not because I wasn't needed, because I wasn't seen. And something inside me hardened, just a little. Not anger, not yet, but resolve. A quiet promise beginning to form. like the first crack in a frozen lake before the thaw. Something was going to change. I wouldn't be the glue anymore. I wouldn't be the silent engine, and I wouldn't stay here, not another night pretending this was what love looked like. The moon was full that night, spilling silver light through the slatted blinds and casting lines across the bare walls of the cramped room. I couldn't sleep. Not with the voices echoing from downstairs, the thuds of laughter and footsteps, the occasional swell of music as someone opened the back door. It was like being in a house of strangers. My own blood. And yet somehow I'd become the outsider, the afterthought. I lay on top of the sheets fully clothed, my shoes still on, arms crossed over my chest. Every now and then, I checked my phone, expecting something. Maybe a message. A knock at the door, someone realizing I was gone from the party, but nothing came. Not a single buzz, not even a generic, "Where'd you go?" from a cousin trying to look polite. They didn't notice I'd disappeared. Or worse, they had, and they didn't care. Around midnight, I heard the telltale sounds of a few people cleaning up. Cabinets closing, chairs scraping the floor, muffled voices about where the leftovers should go. I caught Jared's voice joking about hiding the rest of the peach cobbler before Frank could eat it all. I had bought that cobbler, drove 30 minutes out of the way to get it from the bakery Jared's wife had casually mentioned liking. And they were talking about it like it had just appeared. I closed my eyes and breathed in slowly, trying to ground myself. But the weight in my chest wouldn't lift. The grief of misplaced trust is heavy like that. It presses down, filling your lungs with silence, making every breath a labor. The next morning, I woke early, before the sun had crested the hills behind the lodge. The house was quiet, still thick with the remnants of a party, half-empty glasses on the counters, a sticky film on the hardwood floor, someone's sweatshirt draped across the banister. I moved like a ghost through the kitchen, taking slow steps, my suitcase in one hand and my backpack slung over my shoulder. I didn't make noise. I didn't leave a note. I didn't want to give them the chance to twist my leaving into another story where I was too sensitive, where they could shrug and say I should have spoken up if I had a problem. I didn't have the energy to explain anymore. I'd spent a lifetime explaining. I placed the key to the lodge on the granite counter, right beside the fridge where I had posted the printed schedule, my schedule, with colorful pins and printed name tags that no one had touched. On the way out, I stopped by the edge of the yard, where a folding table still held the remains of someone's late-night snack. A plastic fork stuck in a drying bowl of potato salad, red Solo cups dotted with condensation rings. I stared at it for a while, the mess of it all. So symbolic. In the gravel lot, my car looked exactly as I'd left it, tucked between Aunt June's monstrous SUV and Thomas's rental. I loaded my things into the trunk in silence, then slid into the driver's seat and gripped the wheel. I didn't start the engine right away. My fingers curled tightly, knuckles white, as I looked back at the lodge through the rearview mirror. It was a beautiful place. The kind of place people would post about online, tagging it with smiling group photos and captions like "Water family first" and "Blessed weekend." But inside it was something else. A hall of broken mirrors, each one reflecting a version of family that no longer fit me. I drove away slowly, the gravel crunching beneath my tires like bones underfoot. With every mile I put between myself and that lodge, I felt something shift. Not relief, not yet, but a loosening, a beginning. It wasn't until I got to the first gas station 20 minutes out that I realized I'd never even unpacked the thank you cards I had written. They were in the glove box, addressed by hand, each one sealed with a sticker of a gold heart. I'd planned to place them on pillows before people left. I pulled them out and looked at them one by one, the names of the people who had forgotten. Me written in my own handwriting, Melissa, Frank, Leah, Aunt June, Jared, my own mother. I didn't cry. Not yet. But I felt hollowed out in a way that scared me, like a candle burned so long it melted into nothing but the shadow of light. I put the cards back and shut the glove box. When I got home later that day, I didn't unpack immediately. I went straight to the living room, curled on the couch, and sat there in the quiet. My apartment was still, warm in the late afternoon sun, filled with things I had chosen. Books I loved, photographs that made me smile, a throw blanket I had bought for myself. It felt safe. Mine. I hadn't realized how much I'd been craving that until now. The first text came in around 3 p.m. It was from Kayla. "You left?" I stared at the message. Not, "Are you okay?" Not "sorry." Just 2 words, a confirmation. A mild surprise. I didn't respond. An hour later, Melissa posted a group picture online. The whole family in front of the lodge, arms around each other, grinning in their matching t-shirts. T-shirts I had designed, ordered, and paid for. I wasn't in the picture. I hadn't been told they were taking it. The caption said, "Nothing like family. Until next year." That's when I cried, not because I missed them, but because for the first time, I knew I wouldn't be there next year. And I meant it. The tears didn't last long. They came in quiet waves, not like a storm, but like rain that had been sitting in the clouds for too long, waiting for permission. When they were gone, I sat very still, letting the silence fill the spaces where expectation used to live. There was something deeply clarifying about that moment, like seeing the floor of a lake after the mud finally settles. The image of the family smiling without me burned behind my eyelids, but instead of the sharp pain I expected, there was only a steady throb of truth. I had spent years trying to prove I belonged. In the little ways, the invisible ways, offering rides, remembering birthdays, booking Airbnb cabins, and stepping in wherever a need arose. I mistook usefulness for love, and they had let me. Because people will always take what you're willing to give without boundaries, especially when giving is all you know how to do. That night, I opened my laptop and started pulling up receipts. I gathered them one by one, cross-checking credit, card charges with grocery store emails, Venmo transfers, and hotel confirmations. The final total came to $2,116.48. I wrote it down in a notebook, just to see it on paper, just to prove to myself it was real. Then I opened a new email. I didn't over-explain. I didn't add a smiley face or soften my words. I listed every cost clearly, line by line, and split the total evenly among the families that had attended. No passive aggression, no room for misinterpretation, just facts. At the bottom, I added my payment links, Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, and a single sentence. "Please reimburse your portion by the end of the month." I sent it to every adult who had been at the reunion. No exceptions. Then I turned off my phone. For 2 full days, I didn't check my messages. I didn't scroll social media. I didn't try to predict their reactions or defend myself in advance. I let the world turn without me for once. And when I finally turned my phone back on, I found exactly what I expected. A few paid immediately, without a word. Leah sent me her share with a comment. "Didn't realize you covered so much. Thank you." Jared's wife paid theirs, though. Her message was a curt, "Noted." Kayla sent half, followed by a text that read, "Can we talk soon?" Others didn't reply at all. Aunt June's email bounced back. Melissa read it, but didn't acknowledge it. Frank, predictably, texted me a long, frustrated rant about how family doesn't nickel and dime each other, how I was making it awkward, and how he thought I was better than that. I didn't reply, not because I was afraid, because I didn't need to. Instead, I spent the week reclaiming pieces of myself I had long ignored. I went to my favorite bookstore and bought a new journal. I took myself out to dinner, the kind of meal I would have said was too expensive before I spent over $2,000 trying to be seen. I lit candles at night and let silence be a comfort instead of a punishment. And I started writing letters, not to send, just to empty my heart. Letters to the child I used to be who thought being good meant being needed. Letters to the version of me who always swallowed discomfort to keep the peace. Letters to my future self, promising never to build belonging out of sacrifice again. Weeks passed, then a month, and I didn't hear from most of them again. I thought I'd feel empty. I thought I'd miss the messages, the group chats, the constant hum of being involved, but all I felt was space. Beautiful, open space. And in that space, I began to grow something new. Not resentment, not bitterness, just boundaries. A recognition that I didn't have to keep giving myself away to earn a seat at a table where I was barely acknowledged. One day, I took the lanyards I had printed for everyone, still sitting in a box by the front door, and I burned them in a metal bowl on my balcony. I watched the flames curl around the edges of the name tags, watched them blacken and disappear. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. Family is supposed to be where we're loved without earning it, where showing up is enough. But sometimes family is just a shared history, not a shared heart. And sometimes walking away is how you write a new story from the ashes of the old one. I didn't stop loving them, but I started loving myself more. And when the next year's reunion came and went without a single message, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free.